Tech Services. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great, thank you. Could you make Donna a panelist, please?
Yes.
I've sent a few promotion requests. She hasn't responded.
Okay, thank you.
And I came down with the flu.
Yeah, they say it's not possible, but I'm pretty sure it's possible.
Your body just gets run down. I got my COVID booster a few weeks ago, and for 2 weeks, my body was just struggling,
Yeah,
just working harder.
yeah,
So,
yeah, this latest booster really knocked my mom down too.
really, yeah. I've got my flu shot in, so. We're just waiting on Bill and Lee. They both confirmed in-person attendance.
Okay, great.
So I have us muted right now. So I'll let folks on Zoom know that we're still waiting for 2 more members, so we're gonna give them a couple more minutes.
Yeah, and then I get to put some waders on and go chomping around spring samples.
Yay!
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, actually, it'll be a good time. We picked up 20 springs out of our database to sample annually for quality,
Okay,
and it's going to go into the National Groundwater Monitoring Network program. So, and we're trying to decide which 20 springs we're going to sample. They need to be perennial springs, so we're trying to figure out which springs we want, and throughout southern Indiana, any place kind of in the uplands area. So, yeah. I think we're going down to Lawrence County today.
Well, there's some spring water up in northern Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yeah.
You drink it.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes in flowing, and we've got a well house that.
Sure.
Comes constantly flowing, and you just fill up your
Yeah.
jugs.
Actually, there's a lot of places that people roadside get their water from in southern Indiana. There's yeah. And that's a little concerning, actually,
Have
but
they been tested?
most of the time, no, that's why we're actually going into, we're trying to find those that are public water
yeah.
I don't think I
systems.
trust any here in the state of
Yeah.
Indiana.
Yeah, when I was looking, I used to live in Paoli area. When I was looking for a house, everybody tried to sell the house saying there were springs on the property and you could drink the water, except for that one, because that one goes muddy, or, you know. But I don't know if that's true, but. My first question was always, have you tested them? Well, no, it's spring water, it's clean.
That's very relevant to our discussion later in this meeting on the
Yeah.
karst ordinance.
Yeah,
Where we will be focused on, I guess, pollution prevention.
Yeah.
But also, so we're just waiting on Bill. He confirmed he'll be here in person, so I'll give him another minute and we'll get started.
Well, where I live, it started out in
Council meeting.
the water well.
I didn't.
No,
And I got the, got city water in.
well, that's what it was there. It was the final thing. They were gonna do public comment.
Yeah.
I figured it's
Did
anything
it-
crazy.
were you glad for that move?
And I haven't heard anything. So
I would have always
Yeah, yeah,
needed it.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of
Oh, yeah.
a lot of well owners either really appreciate getting public water supplies or really don't want it. It's really polarized.
Hmm.
There's no like, well, I don't really care.
Be good to get
And it's criminal.
sewers out there too.
Oh,
Sewage system, but
Big
no,
conversation at the AIC about that.
Oh,
Where- now where's this?
Kind of nice to listen to.
out North Maple Road.
Elizabeth Night and
yeah.
one of our.
I'm
justices,
still
but
learning the lay of the land. Where's North Maple Grove at?
Yeah.
You know where
Yes.
Westbury is?
Yeah.
The only guy.
Yeah.
We're down the hill
Okay,
to the west of the
Okay.
first road to the
There
right.
you go.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right,
North Maple Grove.
Good, good,
okay.
good fun to listen to.
There's a lot of development out there and all
Yeah, there's a
septic.
lot of interesting
Okay.
discussion going on now. We're kind of in a good position right now to take advantage of it.
I'm surprised the room wasn't as full as I expected it to.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen that BRCJ.
Well, it's when it gets cold, it comes out. Morning,
Morning.
sorry.
No, it's okay. We have everyone here now, so we'll let you get settled in and get started.
Yeah, I feel like I'm stuck.
It's the chair. Obviously. I feel like we're the.
There we go. That's better.
Trying out my new.
So Bob Audio said he will not be able to attend. Would any of you like to run the meeting in Bob's absence?
Who's the vice
I
chair?
don't think we have one, but
I
I
don't have-
nominate Bill.
Okay, well, should have had 2 cups of coffee. Okay, well,
I'm still on my first.
yeah, well, let's call the Monroe County Drainage Board. Sorry, Wednesday, October 5th meeting to order. And first item is approval of the minutes from June 6th, which was a few months ago. And so,
I wasn't there, so I have to call out.
and I haven't had a chance to review them, so.
Put it off till next time.
I'll move to table him.
Sure.
Second.
Okay, so the second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, we'll table those to our next meeting.
Good.
And then now we'll move into public input for items not on the agenda. Do you have anything? Chelsea?
You don't have anyone else? Any other members of the public present except for our agenda items?
Sure. Well, then,
Raising hands.
okay. So we'll move into new business, and the first item is drainage easement waiver request for 5015 West West Hanks Crossing.
Which I don't even know where it's at.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is that the one that's in the?
So I'll pull this up for you
Okay.
and talk through it. We also have Ben here. He's the property owner.
Okay.
So thank you for joining
Morning,
us.
Ben.
So, let me give you some reference on LVGIS. So we are going the west side of town. And thinking to watershed, the east side of the airport, off, south and right road. Okay.
Okay, so north of Cars Farm Park.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, that's.
There's history on this one. I read through the old drainage board minutes from the 90s when the subdivision was first created. And you have the original plan set in the packet and as well as the plat. So this is the property that we're looking at 015 West Hanks Crossing. To the north, we have railroad tracks and then an ag field. To the east, there's a private property with a private pond on the property that was subject to some discussions during the original development. And then Grandview Elementary School to the south. Okay, and then in here, yeah, I did a very nice job presenting this material. So Ben is requesting to build a pole barn in his backyard. He has a drainage easement covering much of his backyard. Provides information on the dimensions. Eric and I went out there to the site visit as well, so we're somewhat familiar with the site and the land. He's requesting to build a barn in the drainage easement. I think we don't get this very often. But I think we should have some discussion on this because of the state of the infrastructure there and what should or shouldn't be happening in this area, so. So we're looking at lot 20 here. There is a drainage easement. There is a drainage easement in the rear of the property. So this according to the original plans, was supposed to be a detention pond. Now. There. So Todd Stevenson, my predecessor, did some work on this, working directly with the contractor during discussion, and I do not have much record of what he decided or what happened really, but all I know is that there is not much detention happening in this part of the yard. So,
There was a lot of discussion of that in the plan commission.
okay,
You might find something more. there.
Yeah.
It was long enough ago, so I think we were going to just come in and fix it,
okay.
which I take it never happened.
Either it did or it has since changed or wasn't done sufficiently and just needs maintenance. Trying to go through specific materials for a full plan set review. So this is the dimensions of the barn, and again, lot 20. So fall within the setbacks required by the planning department. 34 foot by 20 foot, so it will require a building permit. But before any of the departments review it, because it's a drainage easement, the drainage board needs to make a decision first. Pictures of the backyard, it is fenced in. There are a few trees. Will you be removing trees for this?
Yeah, those two right there. will
These
be,
two? Okay.
removed before we go.
Okay, for the 2 pine trees. All right,
You get to replant them,
What's that?
you replant some new ones,
Yeah, actually, my wife is gonna make me replant some new ones.
good.
that's typical what the board would require anyway. We
Yeah.
usually ask for at least 1-to-1 replacement if you need to remove trees for structure. So. Again, this is the plat.
So I guess I'm not following where there was supposed to be a detention pond there.
Mhm.
And is it supposed to be delineated anywhere? And you can't find any trace of that?
Yeah, I'm gonna
So
pull
it
the
was all
plan set.
discussion, okay.
That should give us some idea of what it should look like.
And how much is the barn encroaching into the easement, just touching?
It'll be completely within the easement.
Completely within it, okay. Because
Yeah,
when I look at this little approximate size location for proposed solar pavilion, it looks like it's just
What
at
is
the
that?
edge of that.
Yeah.
Go back to that
Yeah,
picture
So
here.
completely within.
What is that? Two lines that
these,
going across diagonally,
yeah, so this is the easement itself. And then they require a 25-foot setback from the detention easement. That would be for any residential property. You can't have a house within 25 feet of that. That's in chapter
Yeah.
761 requirement, which isn't always followed. so.
Okay, I'm following along. I haven't seen a drainage easement done like this yet.
Yeah.
You show yours a lot different than Terry did, and
Yeah.
is the whole thing an easement?
No, we're just looking at this corner.
that whole triangle right
Right
there's an
there.
easement,
Triangle,
yeah.
and the barn is supposed to go right in here.
And it was also on lot 19 as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
Said whole,
19 and 20 are the 2 lots with detention.
But we're talking about 20.
Correct.
correct.
did the fence have to get approved?
The fence, I don't have any record of the fence being approved. Um,
the fence
There's-
is going.
what?
Good, good.
I say. There are a lot of fences and drainage easements in the county. So,
And the fence goes between lots 20 and 19.
correct.
Is the fence actually your neighbors or is it?
That's mine, yes.
Was the fence there when you bought the home or?
No, I had it just built about 4 years ago.
Okay.
I want to pull up, just so you know, the conditions, restrictions, obligations, and protective covenants on the plat for the subdivision. Ran this by Dave Schilling, and he said that the only way to enforce these is for the neighborhood itself to enforce them. So then this is for you. If you have a homeowners association, no, I figured out, they would be the ones to enforce this. there is a provision in here that does not allow accessory structures such as barns. But the county can't enforce that. It's up to the neighbors to do. So if your neighbors say you can't do it, then that's on the plat. The neighbors can also form an HOA. They can modify the covenants and restrictions on the property. There's a lot that the neighborhood can do if they'd like to, but I thought that was worth noting in here that it's not something we can enforce at all. And if the neighborhood doesn't have any objection, pretty much. So,
I see.
yeah.
So they're both contingent on each other, and so, yeah.
Can
Do we
we,
know anything about like any recent storm event and kind of what kind of flooding, if there is any flooding that goes on in that area?
Yeah, it's been February of 2019, June of 2021. No issues on your property.
No, the neighborhood, if you zoom out, the neighborhood did get a little flooded, but actually not in my property at all. Right there at the T intersection.
Yeah, there's a,
That whole area was under about 2 to 3 feet of water in June of then.
yeah,
And actually, my brother-in-law was trying to get to our house during that event, and his car got stuck. So he pushed it to higher ground to my house.
oh my God,
And we didn't have any flooding during that event in the backyard.
that's good to know, because there is a yard in Lake here. On the plans, but yeah. That is good to know. So yeah, I mean, the house is very high up compared to the drainage easement itself in the area, but I do want to.
so, can we look at the original plans? Because I'm wondering if
Yeah.
the drainage easement was turned into a relief for that pond, because it looks like the pond would potentially overflow into that area, if I'm looking at it correctly.
Yeah, existing pond. And this. So we do have plans for a structure. Here. Oops.
And it was like connected to that pond.
Do that.
It's on outside the area.
It's outside of the subdivision.
Yeah.
Oh, the lake or the time for the motion.
Okay.
What a crazy north arrow there.
Computer is just not working, it's working too much. All right. Go back up. So this has the storm structure data table. I'm gonna go to the grading plan. And we can go look at structure 117. This is just supposed to be 8-inch PVC pipe, which Eric and I went out and we found 2 8-inch PVC pipes, but they were just kind of laying on the ground.
Ah,
And we're like, oh, I wonder what that is. So
Yeah.
there was an attempt there, but I would not call it successful or functioning.
Yeah, topographic map of that area.
Yeah, don't blame me for
And it's
So-
in the sinking tree.
it. This isn't sinking creek. Alright, so this is what I want to get at, is that there was supposed to be,
City contours.
yeah, these are the
1, 2, 3, 4,
proposed
5.
contours. Here, we don't have great contours on. Those are two contours, alright.
If I could add, so when it does rain very hard, there is a sort of ditch that runs between the train tracks and the back of my house.
Yep.
And so all the excess water from the neighborhood that flows towards that pond flows between my backyard, right along the train tracks, goes
Right.
through the woods and into that pond.
Mhm.
So nothing actually flows through my yard.
It's an unclassified flow line from
Mhm. Yeah.
that DNR. I think goes right
Um,
back to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that pond, when it gets sort of full, it spills over to the south. There's a spillway, and then there's a creek that runs under the road there to the east.
So I have a couple more things to mention. One is the state of this yard here, the other is the railroad. I did talk to Bernie about whether or not the railroad has a culvert there. He didn't say definitively, but he said probably. And, and he has a lot of experience on this project as well. I asked him to comment, he said no. But he said they did look at, ditching this along to bypass property, but I don't think it was feasible or something. But in the long run, it is definitely a flow line here that crosses under the railroad in some way. Culvert, if it's there, is probably very buried. But it is about in this area here that it comes out. This little, it's a pretty shallow ditch, little property here. So that is noteworthy. The other thing to mention is the state of the neighbor's property. Where this right here. There's a
Oh, the
double,
property lines are slightly
Is it-
off.
and they are very.
Yeah.
There's a double inlet at the end of the cul-de-sac here with a pipe that goes out. It makes a bend somewhere around this area. We weren't able to locate the manhole. And then it comes out as a 12-inch pipe right here. And that's how it. I think it works. Again, I wonder if this was something Todd got involved in. I'm not sure. Not sure how the pipe gets smaller as you go down and then. I don't know. But anyway, it exits here and there's a clear flow path from the pipe that goes directly along here out to the neighboring property. That's where all the water goes.
So the property lines go through houses there.
Well, it's
The
offset.
property
See
lines
the
are off. I thought I
cul-de-sac?
could just turn them off.
Jim, you can see the cul-de-sac. It just slides over.
Yeah. Both side here. I should just turn the property lines off. It's not helpful. But yeah, this property does not look like a detention pond. Ben said that he thought it was raised up about 3 feet by previous homeowners years ago. And it looks like it's raised up and there's a drop off right here. Water just goes out to the pond with no detention,
Is
from
that
what I can see.
a barn or your
That's just a shed,
just shed?
yeah,
And that's currently in the
Yeah.
easement.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the fact that it's not at the proper elevation in general, the whole backyard. So. So yeah, it's all kind of a mess.
I'm curious if planning wanted to speak to anything, because there's a lot of moving parts here with,
Yeah.
And then prior to that, maybe when you were aware that there was a drainage easement in your property, how did you come up about that? I don't want to make any assumptions, so like maybe starting when you had the fence constructed.
No, I didn't actually realize there was drainage, so I started looking and wanted to build a pole barn, and looking at flat map a couple months ago, realized there's drainage in the right where I build.
Yeah.
First time I noticed it.
And you say there's no homeowners association in all of this thing?
This is not in Fieldstone,
Oh.
but in this neighborhood, there's not.
This
First
is
farm,
First
so-
Farm subdivision.
Oh, all right, yeah,
It's really close to Phil's.
yeah.
I'd say, just roughly speaking, about a quarter of my neighbors already have some sort of pole barn or other sort of structure in their backyard.
As far as the covenants go, which isn't really something, but. I'm just trying to understand how this thing precipitated, I guess.
So, because the property lines are so far off on the 39 degrees
Yeah.
or elevate, how close to the railroad tracks is your property line? So what I'm asking is, I guess what I want to get to is just that
I can
That
give you a
drain-
definition.
that kind of flows through the back, is that within your property line?
No, it's that drainage ditch is definitely outside of my property
Okay.
boundary.
The railroad's probably 100 feet wide. My guess.
Are you talking about
So
at the
those lines
base
maybe
or
look
at the
correct.
top of the?
That's what I can't figure out. Yeah, those
Yeah,
maybe look correct, right?
Yeah, the cul-de-sac, just if you slid it,
Does it look correct to where the blue line is?
Yeah, with the,
it's about right. It would be just slightly up just a little bit. See how, if you
Towards the
slid the,
track?
yeah, if you slid the cul-de-sac. If you, you know, slid that over and made them line up.
25 feet.
The right of way or the railroad?
I'm saying the cul-de-sac should be over about 25 feet.
Yeah,
You zoom in, his fence is kind of on his property line. It's just his
Yeah,
back,
yeah.
So that can kind of show you
Yeah.
how off it is.
Yeah.
But then the fence is right here.
but like the railroad, if that's 100 feet wide, 50 feet from the center line of the tracks is his backyard.
There,
Yeah.
fence along the
There's
road.
a fence along the back.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
I think I see it.
That's what we do.
So, so from the center of the tracks into the backyard is 50 feet.
Right.
So all that drainage, that little swale probably fits neatly within that, so.
And you're not certain if there's a culvert there, so that rail bed could. You know, would not let water kind of just
Oh,
flow over.
I bet there's a culvert in there, because that
There
whole
has to
field
be.
drains that way.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it looks like with this flow line too, but
But I mean, I'm assuming here in the back field, it's just filled in.
Yeah.
Said there's some water bubbling after a rain event, but no clear indication of like,
Yeah, there's definitely a depression right on the other side of the train tracks between my yard and the train. And when it rains, a lot of water comes up from the ground through that soil, through that sandy, silty area. And when it's dry, it's a depressed area. There's no clear, I've never dug it, so I don't know what part it goes.
I think this line here is correct. It's about 50 feet from the center line of the tracks, so. So yeah, I think it's clear the railroad has some type of conveyance under here with a small ditch. It should eventually get to the pond. I don't know if it ever intended to go through detention at all or bypass it.
The other thing I'll just throw out is, when we first moved here, we've lived in this house for about 6 years. So about 3 years ago, we were kind of tired of a lot of the runoff not going into that ditch. So my wife and I, we built a rain garden, just to the left, almost right up next to 21. So we have a rain garden that's about 9 feet long, about 3 feet wide, and about 8 inches deep, built with like natural plants and gravel and sand, and that collects a lot of the water that would come from 21 and the other neighboring properties, instead of it flowing into our backyard. So we sort of keep our yard dry that way.
You're on sewer, right?
What's that?
Sorry, sanitary sewer, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Made me start thinking, how a septic system,
Oh,
making sure
gosh, yeah.
that we had space for all these things.
Is that field to the north all drained toward the railroad tracks?
A portion of it, not all of it. There are a few different drainage areas. It's main right here, but then there's also a bigger swale comes through here. So, if this were all to be developed, I'm not sure where the main outlet would be.
It looks like there's a really significant draw in first roots.
Yeah. They don't want to go there. If I were to have it.
So we're supposed to see if we can allow a pole barn in the drainage easement.
Yes.
That doesn't have a detention basin,
Mhm. So, yeah.
but has some piping.
Has some evidence of, there was at one point 2 8-inch PVC pipes there. There's currently no berm that I could see, and the neighbor's yard is completely filled in. There's no indication of it being a functioning pond.
This goes back to 2000.
2000 when the was approved, late 90s, the plans were completed.
I'm wondering if we should find out what plan commission,
Yeah,
if there was something specific or concerns there before we.
we do have a Jamie Behrman on the Zoom.
Oh,
Kelsey, I pulled the file to see what the conditions of approval were for the plan commission.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's not much. It just references preliminary drainage board approval granted on October 14th, 1998, with final drainage plan approval subject to drainage engineer. Please see correspondence to the developer's engineer for details of required revisions to drainage plans. So it was a condition of approval. And I'm glad that you pulled the plat on this. We have communicated with the owner about a plat amendment. But the more we think about that there was supposed to be a drainage pond there, I don't think it could be a final plat amendment. If it's a condition of approval that there was a pond there, it would have to be a preliminary plat amendment to the plan commission.
So Jackie's saying in order to get, if we had to eliminate the pond or the drainage easement, we have to get a preliminary plat amendment.
So are you saying that needs to be done prior to our discussion?
Well, either way, we had communicated with the owner that this was a first step to make sure that they would be able to garner drainage board support, because if they didn't have drainage board support to either remove the easement or to do some sort of plat amendment through our office, then it was kind of a way to stop the process early before investing too much. So if the drainage board decides to approve, they still have to go through plat amendment process. If the drainage board decides to deny, then we wouldn't recommend a plat amendment process, and we'd recommend putting a different location or size of pole barn on the property.
So we should consider making a contingent if we make a motion to approve.
I also, well,
Go ahead, I was trying to say, go ahead. Kelsey.
we should contact the downstream property owner if we decide to do away with the detention pond in the subdivision.
Because that pond's actually acting as probably as a detention basin anyways. I don't know how much the water level fluctuates or even the overflow. Maybe,
Yeah. Here's the history of this pond. Was it an old farm pond?
we'd have to go back through the historic, like Google Earth, sometimes you can go back in
I
time.
think go back and
Go
look
back
at
in
the
time.
old.
You can always put the pole barn on stilts.
Well, yeah,
Just-
Actually, we did
It's
this.
classified as a wetland under kind of the state data. So under the NWI, it's considered a wetland.
Yeah, it's not ground truth, so it's a body of water. So it's gonna get captured in them.
Kelsey, I'll also say that, as with some of the subdivisions that we've had in years past, that there was a letter of credit on file for what they just said, completion of public improvements, which typically would have included funds for the drainage pond being constructed. But my guess was, the last letter I see is from 2005, so it may have been that we just missed getting to the bank in time, and that money, I didn't see it in Ben Ayers records as an active letter of credit or cashier's check that we had in our file.
Okay.
I have
So-
that pond on my 1989 aerial.
Yeah.
It's been there for a while. That's as far as I can.
So the only thing I would mention is that, if we were to remove maybe a portion of the area, there is still drainage along the back, and there is still a bit of drainage there coming out of that pipe. You know, so
Yeah.
I'd be okay with taking out a portion of the areas large enough to build a structure there, but still leave in the areas that are conducting flow as drainage easements. So
So would we want to give Kelsey maybe some time to look at that and then kind of propose if that fits within your calculations? And then if so, then we can determine kind of where we are then. And then obviously it sounds like you have some more process to go through with planning after this. But I guess I'm trying to do a full straw here, and read the room. Do we feel like we can make a decision today, or do we need to let Kelsey spend some time and then revisit this?
Well, I'm looking at GIS. It appears that the drainage swale or the way the water's flowing is within the railroad right away and not completely within the backyard lot. Right? And putting the pole barn where it came off 5 feet from the railroad right away, so there's an additional 5-foot strip.
The proposed pond is mostly in this area where the barn's supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah. And where the neighbor's building is as well.
Oh,
So, and
Yeah.
if the grade was raised, how many, maybe you sure that it was a couple
Said
of
three.
feet? Yeah,
It looks like it was raised at least 3
Yeah.
feet.
so then maybe it's 6 feet higher than it should have been if the basin was in place.
wow.
And I'm kind of thinking the drainage is working along the railroad. And it's been since 2000, maybe not a fully built subdivision, but it seems like the pond to the east has been buffering Sinking Creek perhaps. Now, I don't know, like when that rain event was in was it the one that was at 2 feet? Did you know how high the pond was maybe back then? Probably was.
Pond, but it's because of the spillway over
Yeah.
on the other side, the pond stays almost the same level year round.
Okay, it stays at the spillway elevation.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no really any detention buffer within that basin. Okay.
The discussion of what type of barn, like. Is that relevant? Like, to have one that's kind of on stilts. I know that's more expensive, but But-
Well,
gosh.
it's kind of
I-
his,
Foundation.
it's their
I mean,
risk,
it's-
you know, if it floods and the barn floods, it's,
well, and then the removal of the trees will serve as some stormwater mitigation.
yeah.
Would be putting, you know, a structure in place. For. Anyways, I'm gonna leave it up to
Well,
Kelsey's recommendation.
it brings me to the barrier islands where no development should ever take place. Because those are protection for the shoreline. And they're gonna be flooding and they're gonna be moving all the time. There should be no development there, period. As witnessed by Eon, man.
My mom just got power and water back yesterday. Fires up there.
Again,
Yeah.
the government may have to buy out people that have dwellings there.
Yeah.
Have them move.
Yeah.
And then make those into a park where it's primitive camping or something. But
Right.
that's about all they're worth.
I do like that idea. And for this watershed here, Sinking Creek, I mean. Yeah, we need to provide detention and water quality treatment. So that we can protect that sinkhole because it's so unpredictable what's gonna happen and we have. People, homes and infrastructure in the floodplain. Right here. Yeah. My main concern right now is getting this property owner up to speed on this, because this decision to me would be the drainage board saying, we're just admitting that there's no detention happening from the subdivision, we haven't enforced it, so that's what has the county done to make sure that the subdivision is still retaining what it should have?
What could we, from that aspect, what power do we have? We can't go back to the developer because Cornwall's not around. And we don't really know what happened. I mean, I was here, I don't remember, and I can't recall.
I don't,
I may have had because it was our firm that did that. I didn't
Right.
work on that. I worked on the school,
Mhm.
but I didn't work on the subdivision. And I may have had to step out while it was being discussed.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was on the drainage board at the time, and I don't recall this one.
Yeah.
We went through too many already, so.
I should have gotten all the. I should get down into the. Sorry, I don't even pull the grade board minutes right now. That's, I should have done that before if I was gonna do that. The 2005 aerials.
We can try to look at our office if we have anything else that relates to this. Follow
Yeah, I feel like with the placement of the rain garden in that area, he kind of already mitigated the tension that we were looking for on his
Yeah,
own.
just something-
Uh,
yeah,
You know,
Yeah,
But we're looking at the runoff from the cul-de-sac that this chart is here, yeah, to this yard. Yeah, so.
yeah, which way?
yeah, it's heading north, really, that other property with the barn on it.
This one,
I'm kind of curious if that subdivision had other detention basins as well. If that T intersection was the low point, it seemed odd that.
I will say, my neighbor who lives at that T intersection complains all the time about the runoff. And he's installed a very additional, like 4-inch pipe. Which, like, not gonna get any flow with those, but it overflows his yard almost every time it starts. It would, yeah, that,
and I can have our crew take a look at that and make sure that there aren't any blockages or. You know, if the pipe was put in a plastic, it's probably might. Look at it.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm curious where the
up. Got
storms,
nice plans over there.
so these were the ones that Kelsey shared with us. I just didn't know where all the.
There's additional detention on the south side.
Yeah.
They used the Grandview ponds and made some modifications to them. For the subdivision, that's all during the south part. Here.
And that's, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, my glasses are not that great, that's uphill. From, oh no,
It's
that's
just
that's
capturing.
380, I can't read. I'm trying to read the contour lines.
830.
can't-
Yeah, yeah.
838 contour, 8.6, so this is capturing this area.
Okay, okay.
25.
Trying to make out what that thing is.
Where
And
does
then
this-
there's
doesn't show
a baby
that.
grade curve right here.
Well, there's,
Where does it-
these are
drainage go
probably
from
sanitary.
the, cul-de-sac?
That's what we're
This is
looking
what I'm
at.
looking at over here, so.
I think this all went this way.
There's a drainage from the cul-de-sac from down the street.
Yep, so this drainage right here is what we're capturing from the cul-de-sac. It goes into a double inlet
There's only an inlet.
underground and it's 90-degree bend and discharges right here.
Good lord,
And then,
why not into the pond?
because it's supposed to go into a detention pond.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
which never was built.
So I have a question. Do you think you would like to look at this as if it was like being proposed and what is needed? It seems like there's a lot of different
Yeah.
variables going on, even with the grading, depth and height and
Mhm.
other aspects, I guess. Like, I don't know if the rain guard would come into your calculations or not, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how we could kind of be, efficient with our time.
Mhm.
Because this is
Yeah.
a big discussion and I'm not saying let's make it shorter, but
No,
I just don't
like,
think we're in a position to really act today.
I'm okay with that. Hearing the discussion and thinking through this, it sounds like it would essentially be a detention waiver,
Mhm.
which
would
we
have
have
to
provisions in our ordinance for detention waivers, notifying the property owners downstream closely.
Yeah,
So,
and my biggest concern is it's right by that rail bed, and if it's a significant storm, there's not too much other ways the water's gonna flow except,
Yeah.
through the homes.
without having anything better than.
But I don't think that's gonna matter if that detention pond's there or not.
Yeah.
But that's my biggest concern is that it's right, but to rail bed.
Yeah, that's why I felt like maybe keep some of the
Yeah.
easement to, against that back,
Oh, backyard.
that back.
Yeah.
Line there against the rail and then maybe remove some of the.
Or would it even be possible to put the barn in that detention setback area?
Yeah.
I know the
Slide,
yard slopes up a bit.
I'm not sure which detention.
Yeah,
sliding goes south. Sliding south slightly.
There's just these double, the double dash line would be the setback area.
Basically, take a lot of your yard.
yeah. I remember it's proposed right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that your yard does start to go uphill. But to me, this area is just to a setback for a residential dwelling. Not necessarily a accessory structure.
Would that be a planning thing to build in the setback? Or is that a drainage board thing?
This is a drainage easement
Okay.
setback. And the house is already built and well above the, any high water elevation. And I can review that at the staff level if it's outside the drainage easement, just within the setback. Just an accessory structure that's not meant for people living in.
I will say, so there's two primary reasons why I want to build it back there.
Yeah.
One is to minimize impact to the whole yard, so not being in the middle of the yard. The other reason is I intend to put a large solar array on the barn.
Okay.
And the way the yard slopes, the only way to get full sun on the roof of that barn is to have it in that corner.
Yeah.
If I'm any closer to the house, it'll be significantly shaded.
Mhm. Okay. Okay,
Yeah, actually, the main purpose of the barn is to hold the solar array. The barn is just a bonus. To have storage and stuff under the solar
Yeah,
array.
okay. All right,
Or should we,
What about orientation? So right now you have it pretty much like east-west, almost perfect.
So if you look at
Is
the,
that gonna adjust?
I'm gonna build a single slope roof style, so the slope of that roof will be facing pure south.
Yeah, looking at that design.
So you're not gonna drive into it, you could have it on stilts.
I guess.
Is this picture you're facing east in that picture,
Yeah,
correct?
so that picture is actually looking at the neighbor's shed in 19. So that's the neighbor's shed in 19. That's the fence separating our yard.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that detention pond proposed would have actually looked like it would have probably gone kind of where those two trees are and kind of where I got a fire pit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Um,
do we want Chelsea to do more research and check a few
Yeah.
more things first?
yeah. I just wanna say that it almost needs to be surveyed because it is close to the boundary. I mean. Hmm.
I'm really curious what your recommendations are, Kelsey.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my first thing would be to verify the location of the drainage easement boundary to see how far it really is in that boundary. If it's partially in there or fully in there, just because the property boundary lines are very confusing on Elevate. The location of the fence doesn't necessarily go directly on the property boundary. And seeing this picture here. It might be maybe within the setback area or partially within the easement. So verifying that first, and I think either way, notifying the downstream property owner, I should just get in touch with him anyway to talk about the fact that there is no detention pond there. And just out of courtesy to him.
You're saying the fence is probably not on the actual boundary.
Hard to say.
Well, if it's on the property line, those, you should be able to find something on the curb, a mark, and then in back, there should be a
Yeah,
pin set.
Yeah, we verified the property stake before,
Oh, okay,
so I can
okay.
show you where the property stakes are. if you're-
Yeah. yeah. And then just maybe do measurements from,
Yeah, because you could just go right, there should be another corner to the southwest.
Mhm.
And then it said, here it says it's 60 or 80.66 feet to the easement.
Hmm.
So I mean, it'd be relatively easy to
yeah.
walk it off or tape it.
Mhm.
You have to use good faith measures there. No one's can't really move it now. I'm just making a joke to this guy. One question, and I guess it's more of a planning, that this, schematic that we see is very close to setback, so would planning want to see like a certified site plan or plot plan to do this?
Good question.
Just because they've been trying to kind of build an ordinance out wherever, when it seems kind of iffy that they can request that. So I'm kind of curious if they're able to speak to that.
Sure. And
John, I was just gonna say that, I was gonna have a follow-up conversation with Kelsey and with the owner. I noticed on there, we did a pre-design with them, and I think we told them that the rear setback was 25 feet, although I noted that they found a section of our ordinance which allows a 5-foot rear setback if the building is 15 feet or less. Since this is a PUD, I just want to double check that that still holds true for this plan unit development, which is kind of its own zoning, and there is some references back to our ordinance, but I think I just want to do a little bit more digging on that part, because if it's more than 5 feet, then maybe people would be a little more comfortable. But I understand the petitioners will or want to get solar panels on it and put it in that location. So we need to do a little more research ourselves.
And the reason I ask that is because if you're wanting something to that effect, and planning might wanting that too, once it gets to actually approving the barn.
mhm.
Then you're not really asking for too much more than what's gonna be asked anyways.
I mean, it's clear. Jack and I need to meet and talk about some things before the drainage board can go on this. So. Sorry, then we won't have an answer for you today.
As you can see, we're really trying our hardest to figure out if this is a doable solution. Or if there is a doable solution.
Yeah.
So,
It's just a tricky drainage easement. Some drainage easements are easier waivers. This one's just hard because it's a detention pond on private property.
right, and yeah, it's a tough one.
A negative.
No
detention
HOA.
pond.
A negative.
A negative detention pond.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So, okay,
Well, should we have?
Shall we make a
to
movement to
continue?
move to postpone this till
You could take no action and then I think it just
carry
stays.
it over to
Oh,
another.
okay.
If we do take like official action, then we have to address it. So if you're not ready by next month, we'd have to. Either way,
So we don't need.
I think we can just move on.
okay, just move on?
Okay. No, then you're free to leave, or you're welcome to stay for the rest of our discussion, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah. Okay, take care.
Okay. All right. You want me to prep?
If you would let me know by 22.
I absolutely will. I would like to preference that our commissioner is double books with her weekly commission meeting. No, so we have her for a few more moments, so just.
And I actually have an appointment at 10, so I have to
Yes.
be
No problem.
walking at the door shortly there before. so.
Okay, so.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I've got that eye appointment at 10:20.
Yeah.
that's-
We want to roll into. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, I. Just, yeah, I guess I'm certain.
Oh, no, it's fine. You want to also roll into the old business, and the first item on the old business is the karst ordinance discussion. You can take it
Yeah.
away.
I just wanted to say that we can discuss the ordinance updates. We don't have time today to dive into it for the technical standards manual and all that, but my goal is to have this to the commissioners in December. So November,
That's next month.
is next month. But I did receive the comments and edits back from Siavash at Chris Riberg Engineering, and I sent you the copies of that if you want.
From Shiavash himself.
Okay,
Oh,
oh, yeah.
I'd love to read what he writes. I listened to him talk enough. I need to read
Yeah.
his writing.
Great. And if you want him to come speak to the board as well, I can ask him to do that. We have some money left in the contract. So,
Might have to be via Zoom. He does live in California now.
yeah,
He does now.
I
He's
see.
always in Indiana.
Yeah.
He's homesteading in
The
California.
California time is painful.
Yeah, right. Very much so.
Yeah, it would be.
So it's kind of more like logistically, like from our standpoint, Erica doing super reviews of construction sites, like I don't want to drag this out any longer because we need the updated ordinance in place for the MS4 program. So,
About the in-person thing.
yes,
I don't know if drainage board would be the best unless we're chopping up a bunch of questions, right? And he's a very great speaker, so maybe when it's presented at the commissioner meetings where a lot more, the public is involved in watching it, it might be nice for him to come and speak during that meeting.
Mhm.
That's just my thought. So if there is some flexibility where we could potentially bring him in to speak, that could be very beneficial both for you and the public.
Yeah, Pam.
And, well, yeah, he would
If
love
we put
to,
it later in the agenda.
Right.
it's quite so bad.
Yeah. Okay,
just a thought.
yeah. I tend to think the commissioners meetings are always so jam-packed and they're on pretty long.
Goes up and down, and something like this would automatically be put at the end of the
Yeah.
agenda
Yeah.
because it takes up a lot of time in that way earlier. people
I don't want to
Stew all of it.
speak for you, but it's an idea, so
I like the idea. but
yeah,
I'd
I
have
think
to
the
see how
public would like it.
Yeah, that would definitely get more public attention.
Wait,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the value is if we do have him speak to it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. We haven't really had any type of public input session on this, other than our own outreach to engineers and contractors locally, who, it would affect them, but it does definitely impact anyone, looking to even just do single lot residential development in the county. So yeah, if you all could look through the updated ordinance. Get it moving.
So we're ready for the discussion next month. Is that what you?
So that we can discuss it and hopefully vote to recommend approval to the commissioners. And again, the ordinance itself should be straightforward. The technical standards manual is something that the drainage board can make edits to at that
Okay.
level, right? So keep that in mind where technical standards manual, Terry intended it to be a working document, So if it's not perfect, we can still make edits to it and pass the ordinance, but we'll still have the ability to update that technical standards manual for our design standards. So
So the ordinance is the Karsten sinkhole development.
the ordinance is the actual stormwater management
Okay.
ordinance to update chapter 761.
So
Within that, there's also karst regulations. So this is a good segue into a discussion with the planning department. So the karst regulations, the goal that Terry had was to take anything related to water quality and design from the planning department ordinance, chapter 829, which you all have a copy of in your packet. We put that in the stormwater management ordinance, chapter 761. Things related to land use and zoning, of course, stay with the planning department. So I'm gonna turn it over to Tammy, who wrote you a memo stating some of her concerns. And just hopefully have a discussion on how to move forward with the parks regulation with the county.
Hi, thanks, Kelsey. Do you mind pulling up my original letter? So just because it's good for reference. So We are also in the process of going through the CDO process and rewriting a lot of our ordinances, and which is helpful because the drainage board is updating theirs at this point. So it should be a good mesh between the two processes. But we're trying to look to see how do we define a sinkhole, and how can planners and our zoning inspectors, kind of detect these. We're kind of doing some work within GIS to see if there's ways that we can update some of our mapping and such to make it easier to see these with our resources that we have at hand. And I did include a map this month of just a kind of what we're looking at. But one of the things is that we had a proposal to maybe increase our sinkhole conservancy areas from a 25-foot buffer to a 50-foot buffer. And we had asked if there was maybe any evidence out there to support such a claim, because we've been using that 25-foot standard for, since I think 1997. And we have allowed structures to go right up to that distance. And so changing it will make some things, not pre-existing, non-conforming at that point, but also will shrink the amount of buildable area on a property in some instances. So what we have right now under inquiry 1 is how we currently define a sinkhole, excuse me, in our ordinance. So anything that's looks to be a sinkhole that's less than 1/4 of an acre, we take the largest closed contour that we can find. And right now we have 2-foot contours that we utilize in most areas. And then we buffer that by 25 feet. If it's a larger sinkhole, there's 2 methods. You can either just outright buffer it by 50 feet, or you can do kind of find the 1% chance flood within that large sinkhole and then buffer that by, is it a 25 foot?
50 feet.
50 feet also, yeah. So if it's a larger sinkhole, there's an alternative method. And we have had one of the surveyors in the area utilize that at least twice that I can think of, maybe 3 times we've seen that utilized. So I guess Ginger had some really nice feedback that she had responded to via email with studies and such that did support a 50-foot buffer, which I thought was great. But we were hoping to get maybe a little bit of input to see if anybody is aware of maybe even, some mapping resources, because we do use some resources through Indiana Map, but it doesn't capture all of even the smaller sinkholes, and caves and springs sometimes don't have that closed contour look. They're more of a little horseshoe shaped or a little dip that we see in the contours. So we're not always aware of everything. I mean, I used to cave a lot, so sometimes I know that there's certain caves on properties, and I know some old resources that are in the surveyor's office to locate those, but oftentimes cavers keep those under wraps. They don't want a lot of people getting into the caves because there's liability. There's a lot of vandalism that occurs, and so it's not a well-known resource sometimes. But I'm just kind of putting some feelers out there to the drainage board, and maybe how can we clearly define a sinkhole, because once we establish that, then it would kick it into the water quality regulations under your ordinance. It would allow us to define where structures could maybe go, and so this is kind of like a first step of how do we define an SCA. And Kel's got a map that I made that just kind of shows, usually we're using a LiDAR map, and we have kind of a cutoff at 12% slopes, and that kind of stems to our eco chapter for Lake Monroe protections. And so the 12% slopes are in that light blue color, and then we have in the key some other steeper sloped areas, but we sometimes can use those in combination with the elevation contours to determine where we think a sinkhole is, and then look at that largest closed contour. which in this instance is the darker blue. And then I did a 25-foot buffer, which is what we're using now, which in this case, this road would not have required any permits to, additional permits or review to go in. The 50-foot buffer, would have required some oversight to install that road or fix it. And then the green, I believe there was some study within Ginger's research. I was just kind of throwing out there what a 100-foot buffer would look like. But if you can notice, like there's a lot of sinkholes on this property. And so to buffer each one of these or have an engineer buffer each one of these, it does take away a lot of buildable area, but, also water quality is super important. So just hoping to get some feedback from you all who are familiar with a lot of our local conditions around here.
I have one general comment, and Tammy, if you could speak to it. We put a lot of this on our petitioner representatives and surveyors, local surveyors. And some of the surveyors are now making a note on their plat that, they're not truth checking that these are actual sinkholes, but they're more just like closed contours and conservancy areas.
That came from a discussion with Eric Decker.
Right.
myself.
So
So,
as we're moving forward, we still don't have a great way of identifying, is this a sinkhole or not? And even the methods that we have now, some of the professionals out there are kind of walking back that they're not necessarily saying this is a sinkhole. They're just kind of complying with what we're asking. So, they're still not like a geologist. out there.
and we don't have the geologist on staff,
Right.
have a forester on staff either, it's,
Mhm. So I guess, Tammy, you don't need to speak to it. You could just confirm if I'm accurate with that statement.
Oh, yeah, you're accurate on that. I mean, we know for a fact of certain farm ponds that were put in and but they don't hold water, but it's because they have that large closed contour kind of look, we're gonna assume it's a sinkhole. And we don't, as planners, have the ability to get out and do boots on the grounds inspection every time either. So we just, if we say it's a sinkhole, we do. And if someone wants to say, well, we know differently or we can prove it, then it kicks it into maybe a higher level of review. But for now, like we see hundreds of permits come through for structures and accessory structures. And, we have to have a way to like at least quickly make a quick assessment of what the property is, what's on the property.
if the stormwater takes on some of the karst regulations, what would the appeal process be? If someone were to challenge a sinkhole conservancy or permit?
Kelsey, I think we had an example of one on Angel's Way that we were talking with you about, and the process we talked about was a preliminary plat amendment and going to the drainage board. But they needed like a geologist, and we have a karst study in our ordinance.
You
Yeah.
have to have that, because we can't make a decision without that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there's easy methods that they could employ to determine that. I
Yeah.
mean, but it would cost.
Right.
a burden.
The cost burden is always gonna be on the
Yeah.
property owner.
Would you like to expand that, Bill? I think like your perspective is very important because you're on the other side of this conversation a bit. With kind of being petitioners, representatives occasionally and looking at the drainage issues, so.
Well, I guess I can't make a determination of whether a closed contour depression is a sinkhole, because I'm not educated in that, I guess, enough to claim or to substantiate whether it is or not. That's why I would rely on a professional geologist to do a karst study.
Yeah.
And then, I think the 20, there's your.
Thank you, Carmen. Next time I'll try to remember my.
Oh, great, no problem.
It's a long way to see it.
Very interesting discussion.
So like,
Bye.
So I've had some conversation with colleagues, which I'm not supposed to do, but you know. We wanted to have the conversation. And from a very minimalistic perspective, this close contour is a very geomorphologically, that is a definition of a sinkhole, is that closed contour. So the methodology that you're using to, at a very 50-foot or whatever level view of this, that is the correct methodology to go forward to identify them. But yeah, boots on the ground, and even to the point of doing some resistivity or ground penetrating radar or something like that is the only true way that you would be able to get to a more definite decision. But yeah, if you look at landforms, the only landform that makes a closed contour like that is a sinkhole.
That's right.
Or a kettle lake. That's the only other one, but we're not in the glaciated
And we're
portion.
not there.
Right, so we don't have to worry about that, right? So,
all close contours are gonna be a sinkhole.
yeah,
Yes.
the problem I see is when you have multiple ones together and you get very large sinks, it's hard to determine because that closed contour can also be on the side of a hill to where it's not closed anymore.
Yeah.
In a saddle.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then there's also, the idea of the cave entrances and springs and all that. I had proposed to a colleague of mine who is also an avid caver and talks about how we don't share cave locations because of the threats to those resources. Similarly, I'm doing something for source water protection programs to try and buffer out those confidential assets so that the public can still know that this area is considered a source water protection. We could do something similar with this where we actually do an overlay of areas that would incorporate springs and caves and sinkholes. The only problem is to buffer out some of those so that the sensitive assets don't get pinpointed.
Yeah.
You would have to add some additional room, which then would take away from that developable land. And so there's got to be a balance that's struck there but definitely an overlay could be made through contracted service.
Yeah.
It's very doable. It's just whether that's a service that needs to be contracted or not.
So that's kind of where my thoughts were, is there is a lot of this data out there and it's kind of coveted because of the sensitivity of that data. It's kind of like the bat habitats. They don't like to give you all that information unless you request it, and then they're more than willing to share it. But we do have kind of a structure now where we can, keep data internal and be used for only internal purposes.
Yeah.
And do you have any insight on kind of the ability to get that data? If it's only meant for internal purposes?
I would honestly, I would go to the Karst Conservancy or Geological Society of America group here in Indiana and venture that discussion with them, because they're the holders of this information, and so they would be able to give you a much better perspective on how they could or would or wouldn't share their information.
So our new coordinator, I think, could be of assistance if he knows exactly what he's asking and who to
Yeah.
reach out to see if we could request some of that data, and then we can discuss how we could keep that internal and private. And I don't know. I don't know if they're willing to give us more data or not, but I know there's more data
Or
out
even
there.
if
Yeah.
we had a buffered type overlay, and if there were an issue, we could appeal it and make the request to say if it's definitive, yes or no.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're probably cringing
I-
at the thought of it.
I feel like having that a buffered overlay would then allow you to then have a specific owner say, I don't think that we're actually in this overlay, and we can prove
Just
in this way, that these are not assets. And so then that person could get kind of a LOMAR, right, with flood zone, right? It was the same
Right,
kind of
yeah.
thing where they would just get a letter saying, or, get a report saying that this is not a sensitive resource and then, then they could proceed or.
Yeah.
So I
And
think,
kind of like when you have to apply for 4144, do the inquiry to DNR for endangered species. You just get back an answer, yes or no.
right,
Present within this area.
right,
And,
right.
um,
But yeah, I would be willing to go with somebody to talk to that group about this kind of idea. I would be willing to kind of be that liaison. I'm not necessarily, I don't have access to the data myself, and we've talked about how we should probably even have access to that sort of
We
data.
could pair you up with kind of the person that knows how to use the data and speak to how we can make it secure.
Yeah,
If that's something you would want to pursue, I would completely be comfortable with kind of
yeah,
our coordinator. He's actually a geologist, by trade, but.
Yeah.
He would
Yeah,
probably
we
be
could-
more and willing and, to work with you
sure.
if he wanted to take the lead.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't want to just send him on a wild goose chase. of, Hey, what kind of data can you find? But we actually have.
yeah,
people We could speak to.
so my colleague suggested that we do that we go talk to that group that holds that coveted data and have this conversation. So I think that's probably a really good step to take.
Secret handshake.
That's right, yeah. They definitely hold their data close to chest. It's
Can
pretty
I
fun.
make a comment about this regarding our
Yeah,
chapter 761?
absolutely.
So this language here with like, if it's sinkhole this size, then you have this buffer. If it's this size, you have this buffer. Terry did away with that because we thought it was too much. He said we should just have. If you have a sinkhole, here's sinkhole conservancy, yeah. And that's when we decided to go with the more stringent buffer size of 50 feet.
Mhm.
We could put this back in there and kind of go forward with how we've been doing it. You're shaking your head.
I think 50
But-
foot's sufficient. I don't
Right.
think that we're gonna have a lot of areas where we're gonna need. What I was proposing with like a larger one, but I just didn't want to be overly burdensome, right? If-
And that's
if-
what planning is saying.
if That's a negative slope away from the sink. Really, you don't need that much buffer at all.
Could we then put in a provision to say if the 50-foot extends then to. The break in the elevation change, whatever, then you
Right.
go up until that water delineation for the sinkhole itself or something, or most people build on the ridge anyway, so. Have to decide if they.
Yeah, most likely they're not gonna be building,
Down house.
I mean, but that could be a very
Get
gentle
to
slope
that,
depending on.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
The city's doing it, they've got a 25-foot buffer and then you have a 10-foot setback
Mhm.
for no permanent structure.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's challenging to work with, but at least it keeps the structure away from that buffer.
right,
Well, and another considerations come up since I even had these discussions that we really should be looking at sinkhole shed, like what
yeah.
size. What drains to that sinkhole, like how big of an area drains to that sinkhole, because that should really determine
That's
how
really-
large the buffer should be as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a lot of considerations that that's hard to capture. So I feel like if you're going to try and capture all of these, the best way to do is just take a very, everything has to be a 50-foot buffer, and then you can contain most of these discussions. The only ones that I would be very concerned about at that point would be anything with a very steep and very large drainage area to that one sinkhole.
mhm,
50 might not do it, but
yeah.
I don't know. I've
But at
never
that
not
point,
done
then
an
we could have
analysis.
to model it and.
Yeah, yeah, I've not done an analysis to see if we have any like that. I don't know.
But you should be
Yeah.
getting, I mean, with 50 feet, you'd still be getting at least a buffer of something that's cleansing the water perhaps before it makes the sinkhole.
Yeah, yeah, and I think actually the state of that buffer is very important too, like,
Well,
like,
it can't be,
yeah, just let go,
Yeah.
right? It's actually a buffer, not a,
Well, the
Right.
trouble here in this county is that you don't have much of stuff, sand or something that. to flow through.
filters.
It's all clay and you don't get anything penetrating that.
But,
that's right. Yeah,
but it's it's important to note the highway department still uses sand on the roads in the winter.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a big
So-
discussion of
Yeah.
the quality of the soil adjacent to.
Yeah.
To the sink is what really stops the flow of
Mm.
contaminants
Yeah,
and things
right, yeah.
through it. So
Yeah.
it's how much organic material you have in those soils and what's the quality of the soil, which is improved by having a good quality buffer, so, it's, you know.
Yeah.
no big deal.
Do you think we could see if planning had any other points or to make up or wanted to comment on anything that we've discussed?
I was
Okay.
just gonna say, if we do increase it to a 50-foot buffer, I think maybe we could look into just making sure that our section about no new construction of any of the following shall be permitted within the SCA. We currently include all private drives. So in the example of the map that Tammy gave, you know, we may have people rerouting their driveway, which may or may not be a good thing. So having built-in exceptions for creating those pre-existing non-conforming standards, because once we go from 25 feet to 50 feet, there's going to be a lot of people already out there that have structures and sinkholes, that have driveways and sinkholes, that we need to accommodate or potentially plan for. And then Ginger, I like your idea on the sinkhole evaluation study and just some of your ideas. I think that section really could use some help. And right now I can't remember if that's in stormwater ordinance or if that's in ours. So I'll take a look at the stormwater ordinance.
Yeah, I have it in there.
I think in the upper Flanders area, there's probably 2 roads that are right next to a sinkhole,
Yeah, there is.
Stewart and Amherst.
Yes, yep. I've been up through there and, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I worked in Orange County where you can't go anywhere. I mean,
Right.
there's, you know, thousands of sinkhole within a square mile. And most of those roads go straight through the sinkholes. I mean, you can drive the road and it's like a roller coaster. And there's a lot of stormwater practices that they started putting in where they put bioretention, you know, creating reactive buffers and things like that within the sinkhole to try and mitigate some of the stormwater runoff. So there is technologies and availabilities of putting filter systems, but then, you know, those fail or they are constructed correctly, or there isn't
Not
one,
maintained.
but it's supposed to be one, or, yeah, right. Right, so it's just it's almost better practice just to avoid, but I don't know, as things come up, it may be where we'll have to look at, you know, not everything can be avoided.
Yeah.
So,
I just have one final thing
and I need to go. so I'm so sorry.
we've been tracking a lot of this since the beginning of 2022 in our office of everything that is being delineated on plats. We might miss a few things, so this isn't a conclusive list. This is just kind of the best data that I've been tracking. And right now we have SCA's areas, 23 of them that went through the preliminary process. And then we're actually tracking the recorded document as well. And through the recorded document, we have 22. So one of them might still be in flux with as far as we're tracking everything that's being recorded. So that's even if it's being recorded from the city, we're tracking that. Now, there might be different ways that's identified on the plat, so we might be categorizing them different, but just as a very raw number to throw out there, since the beginning of 2022, we've been reviewing these plats and we identified 23 in the preliminary process. That's just county alone. We don't follow the city preliminary.
Sure.
And then through the recorded document, we have 22 of them out there. So there's some numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I finally got to use some of what, you know, my staff.
What
has
you
been
collected,
doing.
yeah.
All right, sorry, guys.
No, we will.
Yeah, I've got to go too.
Should we adjourn?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Okay.
I would love to keep talking, but we'll definitely meet on November 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, I might
okay.
not be.
We will find a date to meet.
Okay.
Well, I need to adjourn.
Okay,
So moved.
so moved. I'm pretty sure, hey,
Thank you, everyone.
so long.
I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary, for this.
Yeah, no problem.
You got TSD hosting your meetings?
Yeah. All the meetings.
Okay, they host our licensing board meeting too.
Yeah, they host our survey.